Right now, beneath your feet, Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. You cannot feel it. You never have. But take that away for just 5 seconds, and everything you have ever known becomes a projectile. 5 seconds. That is all it takes to end the world as we know it. Earth has been spinning since before life existed on this planet. That rotation is not just movement. It is the engine behind your weather, your gravity distribution, your magnetic field, and the air you are breathing right now. Everything is calibrated to that spin, and the moment it stops, none of those calibrations hold anymore. What happens next is not a theory, it is physics. And physics does not negotiate. The stop is instantaneous. Earth's crust halts, but everything sitting on top of it does not. This is inertia, one of the most fundamental laws in the universe. An object in motion stays in motion. Earth stops, but you do not. Every human being, every vehicle, every structure, every ocean on the surface of this planet was traveling eastward at 1,000 miles per hour. And in the fraction of a second that Earth's rotation ceases, all of it keeps going. You do not fall. You launch. Every person standing on the surface gets thrown eastward with the force of a collision at 1,000 miles per hour. Not a car crash, not a plane crash. Something that has no comparison in human experience. Buildings do not crumble. They shear off their foundations and become debris moving at supersonic speed. Cities do not flood. They get swept. Everything that was not anchored directly into bedrock becomes part of a global eastward wave of destruction, moving faster than any storm in recorded history. But the oceans are where it becomes almost impossible to describe. The world's oceans were also moving at 1,000 miles per hour. When the land stops and the water does not, you get a wave. Not a tsunami in the traditional sense, something larger. The entire body of ocean water continues eastward, rising over coastlines, over plains, over mountain ranges at the lower elevations. The word flood does not apply here. This is relocation. Entire bodies of water moving over land that was never meant to hold them. And that was just the first 2 seconds. The shock wave from the sudden stop travels through Earth's crust at the speed of sound through rock, triggering every fault line on the planet simultaneously. The ground does not shake. It convulses. Every tectonic boundary that has been holding pressure for centuries releases it in the same moment, compounding the surface destruction with earthquakes that have no historical scale to measure against. And that was still just the first 5 seconds. The surface destruction is immediate. The atmospheric response is what turns a catastrophe into an extinction-level event. Earth's atmosphere was also spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. It does not stop when the ground does. The air keeps moving, and when air moves at 1,000 miles per hour across a surface that is suddenly stopped, the result is a global supersonic wind event that strips the surface of everything the initial inertia wave did not already take. 1,000 miles per hour wind. For context, the most powerful hurricane ever recorded produced winds of 200 miles per hour. What moves across Earth's surface in the minutes following the stop is 5 times stronger than that, and it is not localized to a coastline or a region. It is everywhere, simultaneously. At the equator, where rotational speed is highest, the winds are most devastating. Anything still standing after the inertia event gets taken by the atmosphere. But here is what those winds do to the oceans that are still in motion. The surface water, already displaced and moving eastward, gets driven further by supersonic atmospheric pressure. The interaction between moving water and moving air at these speeds creates wave structures that have never existed in Earth's history. Coastal regions do not just flood. They cease to exist as recognizable geography. The pressure changes alone, the sudden atmospheric displacement would rupture eardrums, collapse lungs, and disorient every living creature on the surface within seconds. At altitude, the pressure differential becomes unsurvivable without protection. The air is still there, but it is moving so fast that breathing it becomes impossible without shelter. And this is where it stops being about individual survival and starts being about whether the planet itself holds together. Earth is not a perfect sphere. It bulges slightly at the equator, a direct result of rotational force pushing mass outward over billions of years. That bulge is not decorative. It is structural. The planet's shape is in equilibrium with its spin. Remove the spin, even for 5 seconds, and that equilibrium breaks. The equatorial bulge begins collapsing inward as rotational force disappears. This places stress on the crust along the equatorial belt that the rock was never designed to handle because it has never had to handle it in the planet's entire history. The result is a second wave of seismic activity, separate from the fault line ruptures of the first seconds, driven purely by the planet trying to reshape itself into a more spherical form. Volcanic systems that were already under pressure find new pathways. The tectonic stress created by the stop does not just shake the surface, it compresses and fractures the crust in ways that open channels to the mantle. Eruptions begin not in isolated locations, but along entire fault systems simultaneously. And then there is the magnetic field. Earth's magnetic field is generated by the movement of molten iron in the outer core movement that is partly driven by and synchronized with planetary rotation. A 5-second stop does not collapse the magnetic field immediately, but it disrupts the fluid dynamics in the core enough to create instability. A weakened or disrupted magnetic field means reduced protection from solar radiation and cosmic rays. Not in 5 seconds, but in the weeks and months that follow, the consequences begin accumulating silently above the planet's surface. And then Earth starts spinning again. The restart is not a relief. It is a second catastrophe arriving from the opposite direction. Everything that survived the eastward launch of the initial stop now gets hit again, this time from the west. The inertia event runs in reverse. Debris that was thrown east is now subject to a westward force as Earth's rotation resumes. Structures weakened but still standing in the first event absorb a second impact from a different direction. Most of what is held does not hold twice. The oceans, which spent the stop period moving east and crashing over landmasses, now face a rotational force pulling them back. The interaction between water that is still in chaotic motion from the first event and a planet that has just resumed spinning creates wave patterns with no historical equivalent striking coastlines that were already destroyed, reaching further inland than the first event, because the terrain that previously slowed the water no longer exists. The geological stress doubles. Fault lines that absorbed the first event and held now receive a second loading from the opposite direction. The volcanic systems that opened channels during the stop now receive new pressure from the restart. The 5 seconds of stillness created a geological wound. The restart tears it wider. And here is the question that scientists would lose sleep over long before this ever happened. 5 seconds was enough to do all of this. What if it had been 6? The honest answer is very little. Casualty estimates for an event of this scale place immediate losses in the billions within the first few minutes. Not from a single cause from everything simultaneously. The inertia event, the atmospheric response, the seismic activity, the volcanic eruptions. There is no safe direction. There is no shelter designed for this. Deep underground is the only answer. Bunkers built into bedrock at sufficient depth would survive. The people inside them would survive physically, but what they would emerge into is a planet that is still technically habitable and unrecognizable in every other sense. The polar regions fare better. At the poles, rotational speed is nearly zero, meaning the inertia event is far less severe. The poles become the most survivable geography on a planet that just destroyed most of its livable surface. Infrastructure, food systems, governments gone. Not damaged, gone. The rebuild timeline is measured in centuries. The species survives perhaps. The civilization does not. Just 5 seconds. Not a war, not a disease, not a slow collapse, just 5 seconds of stillness from a planet that has never once stopped moving. If this changed the way you think about the ground beneath your feet, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where on Earth do you think you would have the best chance of surviving?